Hi, everyone. Welcome back to our podcast. This is episode 4, and I am Andrea. Joining me, as always, is my amazing co-host, Eduardo. Hi, Eduardo. How are you doing?
Good. I feel like I'm a little bit sleepy. That's why I'm a little bit slow. Sorry.
Okay. And we also have Rupal. Hi, Rupal. How are you doing?
I'm good, Andrea. Thank you.
Eduardo, do you want to tell us a little bit more about Rupal? Or Rupal, do you want to introduce yourself?
I'm not going to do justice at how good she is, so I'll just let her introduce herself.
Thank you, Eduardo. Thank you for kind words. I'm Rupal, joining you from Toronto, Canada, and I'm working alongside Eduardo at Do It as cloud architect for around 1.5 years now. And we both are working on amazing projects together, and we wanted to share information about that today. So let's get started.
That sounds
Let's
great.
get started.
Nice to meet you.
What about you? Like, we need to go around. Like, this is the first time meeting.
Oh,
what
yes.
about you, Andrea?
So I'm Andrea. I am working as a conversational designer for a company called kindworks.ai. So I create content, write copy for a chatbot, basically, that promotes kindness at the workplace. Yeah.
I thought for a moment you forgot your title and your job. You were kind of like thinking it. It happens to me. I mean, sometimes I just like, my name is Eduardo, and then I blank out, like right now. No, I'm just kidding. Senior cloud architect at Do It. Happy to be here. We maybe also talk a little bit more about what we do at Do It today, but let's start. What is the topic for today, Andrea?
Okay, so today let's talk about data lakes. I know that with the massive growth of big data, data lakes have become very important in today's data world. So Eduardo, can you start by explaining what a data lake is and how it differs from traditional data storage solutions?
Yeah, I mean, we have an expert here of data lake. She has been working a lot more than me on this space. So I'm just going to do a quick intro. I'm going to let Rupal take us a little bit more. So in previous episodes, we have talked about how data lake is just this thing where you are putting all the data, any data and everything that you want. I'm making it very simple because now I'm going to give the hard part to Rupal to tell us a little bit more about what it actually is and not just this thing. So, Rupal, take it away.
Absolutely. Yeah. So when we talk data and the data lake, what we are really gathering is all sort of data that you have. Basically, when you start as a company, you're kind of looking as to, okay, I have this data, say Twitter data or Facebook references or Twitter talks about your company and different data about how people are using your product. Plus, you have data manuals and everything. Plus, you have data coming in from your machines and everything. Whole lot of data. Now, as a company manager, as a CEO or something, I'm thinking, okay, can I use this data right now? Maybe not. But maybe I can use this later on. So you don't really want to let go of any data. That's where the data lake part comes in. You want to gather and keep all the data till you can use it or make sure that you can use it maybe for machine learning or maybe for some data analytics work. And that's where the data lake part comes in. Now, with big data, you have variety of data, velocity of data, like tons of data, and the data streams in very fast. And that's where the data lake part comes in to store all the data, keep it safe till you can use it next time. So that's the part of data lake. And all the three clouds have different data lakes, but they all have the same utility. So any cloud you choose to go with, you have the data lake functionality in there.
Oh, that's a great explanation, actually. So Eduardo or Rupal,
Okay, you gotta say something because Andrea has never given me that compliment. So that's fantastic.
Let's break down the structure and components of a data lake then. What are the key elements?
Oh, that's for me. Sorry. I'm having a little bit of issues with the
Go
audio.
ahead. Yeah.
Anyway, so Rupal gave us a great explanation of the data lake. What we're talking here now is these elements of the data ingestions, this raw data ingestion that you need to put in place. You need to do something with the data. And you need to make transformations. You have to enhance it, enrich it, or do something with this data. And so this is data processing and transformation piece. A lot of times we hear the term ETL, extract, transform, and load. There's also extract, load, and transform, depending on which steps you make. But it's just this manipulation of the data. And finally, we are sending it over to a data storage management, right? It can be the same data lake, it can be a data warehouse, it can be a relational database. So these are kind of like the three parts of it, like the data ingestion, data processing and transformation, and then the data storage and management. So these are big topics. I have played with some tools around them, not nearly as much as Rupal. Okay, I'm sorry, Andrea, I can't hear you.
Oh, sorry. Let's start with raw data ingestion, I guess, because there is a lot of topics here. It does sound like it's your stomach that it's ingesting something. I don't know. What does it mean?
I'll let Rupal go for it. I was going to pass it over to Rupal in this part. I always do the easy part, which is just the introduction to the topic. And I'm like, okay, I'm done. Give it to Rupal. She's better at this.
Yeah, sure. So it's about collecting the data. So you get data from every different source, right? And it's about collecting the data and putting it together. So if it is from, say, social media, as I said, from IoT devices, and then how you collect the data, how you put it together. Say I'm AWS person, so I will talk about AWS, say in S3. So you want to get data, say from your app or something, you're using, say, Kafka, or you're using Kinesis to put the data in S3. So that is the data ingestion part, is all the data that you're gathering, ingesting it into your data lake, into S3. That is the ingestion part of the data.
Okay, and once the data
Now,
is
Rupal, hold on a
ingested...
second.
Oh,
Hold on a second. On that ingestion part, I want to make a little bit of a distinction, right? Because we have real-time data ingestion and batch ingestions.
Yes.
I'm thinking, sorry, this is the first time I'm thinking. The ingestion of the of live data, are there tools that you can use for both? That is live data
Absolutely.
and batch data?
Yeah. So you can use Kafka and Kinesis. So Kafka is usually used for live data. You can use Kinesis and for the batch data. And you can use Glue as well for ingesting data and for transforming data as well.
And so help me understand this, so help our listeners on this. So if I'm pulling data live, I'm going to use one of these services. What if I need to pull data in batches? Can I still use these same services?
Yeah, you can use the same services, or there are different services for that as well.
Do you recall any of the services? We can, in AWS, we can use DMS to do like transformations. In Glue, we can also do, Glue can also do like these batches and schedule batches to go through.
Yeah.
So that's another one that we can use.
Yeah, so you can, for the batch data, you can use DMS. Now, DMS is mainly used for RDSs as well as other services. You can use the Firehose. So Kinesis Firehose, you use it for batch ingestions. And Kinesis data stream is something that you use for streaming data. So that's how I said Kinesis is used for both of them.
Fantastic. All right. I want to steal your thunder, Andrea. Let's go to the next portion.
So once the data is ingested, what happens next, Rupal?
Yeah, next is what you want to do is look at your data and see, do you need it right away? Or you want to store this data for now? If you're going to store this data in S3, then you want to put it in the life cycle. So you can store it in the data lake part where you're not going to use it very often, and it is much cheaper to store your data that way. However, if you're looking at using your data, say sometime soon, you want to keep it in S3 standard. Now your data is in S3 standard. What you want to do is you want to see if this is ready to be used or we need some transformation. Now, transformation could be you want to see if there is any personal information in this data. If you find that there's personal information and you're not very sure whether it will have personal information or not, you want to use AWS Messi. So Messi is going to check for the personal information. That's the first step you want to do is your data is usable. You want to make sure there's no personal information. You want to see what is the format of your data. Is it the standard format or is something you want to change? So all those things you need to make sure. And you'll ask me how, right? Okay, that's very good, the transformation part. You can use AWS Glue, and then Glue helps you do transformation. You also see the metadata, like what format your data is in, what is the metadata, the data about the data, and that's where Glue comes in the picture as well. So that shows you the metadata of your data and what transformations you need. You can do the transformation using Glue. It could be just writing code about it, or even just making some clicks and making some changes in your data, and you can just do the whole pipeline with Glue for transformation, and you can schedule the pipeline as well. So all these things are pretty easy once you get used to it, but there are tools available for everything.
Got it. Okay, so what about data storage and management?
So data storage.
Go ahead.
Okay, so data storage, as you ingest data, you put it in S3, you transform your data. It's more or less ready to use. You're not using it right away. You want to keep your transformed data, which you will be using, say, for machine learning or say for some kind of dashboards or something. You can use data warehouse for that. So in AWS, you have Redshift, and you can store your data there. Or you can again store your data in S3, which would be slightly cheaper.
Eduardo?
Is there Rupal, is there a benefit of like S3? Okay, when should we use Redshift? When should we use S3? I'm trying to think if there is any other solution in AWS that we can leverage.
Yeah.
But when to use one or the other?
Well, Redshift is the data warehouse. So when your data is prepared and ready to be used in BI, that's when you use it in Redshift. Also, if you're using it for other purposes, like for machine learning or anything, that's when you use Redshift. S3 is still a data storage part. So when you're using your data, it wouldn't be very easy for you to get data out of S3 every time, unless you're just kind of running some ad hoc queries here and there. You could use Athena for that. But if you're using your data and providing data to your app or some other users or something, that's where you're using S3, Redshift. Also, you can share your data through Redshift with other users, with other organizations, with other accounts of AWS. So that is the easier way of managing your data in Redshift. So that's where you use Redshift. But for storing the data, you're using S3 mainly. So it depends on your usage.
Fantastic. And you can combine all of these, right? So for the listeners out there, you can start one path, you can evaluate that, and then be able to combine that. Redshift definitely allows you to query S3 data, and you can do that with Redshift. This name is escaping me. Spectrum.
Yes.
With Redshift Spectrum, and be able to do this. So AWS allows you to have this kind of like ability to be able to do all of these. In GCP, you have like BigQuery, which is a fantastic tool in their warehousing. And also you have cloud storage for GCP that allows you to do the same thing that you will do in S3. Now in Azure, I'm not sure. I will need to double check because Azure is a little bit of foreign land for me and for Rupal. So we'll need to double check on those ones. But there is a solution in every cloud provider to be able to get this done. Yeah, I think that is fantastic. I think that's a great point of the data warehouse and the data lake. It seems like the data lake is a really great choice to go after. So,
but there
is it,
must be
Andrea?
some. Well, there must be some advantages and challenges, no? So, what are the advantages and challenges of using data lakes?
And I think, Rupal, you have started already, right? So we have some. It is cheaper. It is like the cost of S3, cost of cloud storage is cheaper. What are the other advantages that we can have?
The big advantage, I think, is that you have all your data in one place.
Okay.
So instead of having silos, because what happens in big organization is that every unit would have its own set of data, which they would store only for themselves. However, if this data is shared with everybody else, it could be useful. And sometimes you kind of shopping data, which you already might, your another unit in your organization might have it, So if all the data is in one place, everybody can use it, you can govern it well, and then you can get more insight, more data, the better, right?
And so this idea of being able to have everything in one place, I think is an advantage and a disadvantage, right?
And
there is this concept.
why do you think it's a disadvantage?
Well, I mean, if you have all the data in one place, then it can become instead of a data lake, it can become a data swamp, right?
Mm-hmm. Yeah.
Why? I mean, you're really good at this. How can we prevent a data lake to becoming a data swamp? What is it that we can?
That's where the governance comes in. So you kind of know what's coming in. You tag your data, you see what data you have. So it's not just put everything together. You govern your data. So you monitor the data quality, and you also monitor where data is coming from, how much data, how frequently it's coming in, and you document all these things. You put it together. Also, who has access to your data? That part is important too. So that's where the governance part comes in. And when you have the good governance, then it's better to have the data lake because everybody can use it.
Is there a particular how can I put it, a structure that you have come across in regards to putting the data into S3, into regards how data is organized? Any tips around that you can give any of our listeners? Like, what will you say? Where will you start to put like data governance, or how do you start structuring it?
So I would say we can start with the format of data, standardizing the format.
Okay.
I would say the IAM roles, who can access the data. And I would also say the size of data, and then divided by the divisions and divided by the what is in the data. So whatever topics it is and all. So it kind of again would depend on different organizations, right? But this is just a general guideline.
Absolutely. And so one of the for our listeners, one of the other kind of like formats or structures that is very popular is to have this idea of three buckets in S3, in cloud, Google Cloud Storage, or in Azure. Really, they don't cost anything from creating it, right? So whether you have your data stored in 20 buckets or your data stored in one bucket, at the end of the day, it's the same pricing. But what allows you to have multiple buckets, it helps you with the organization of things. So one of the structures is you have a raw ingestion bucket where you are receiving the data as is. And then you have a middle bucket of transforming the data, any transformations, any in-flight things that are being in the move. And then finally, your destination bucket where you have clean data and everything is good. And then that is the data that you use to give access to other people or to be the source for other systems. So there are many different names for this. Some people call it bronze, silver, gold. Some people call it raw, transformation, and transform. So there are many different names, but the idea is the same thing. It's three buckets: one for ingestion, one for transformations, and one for final and clean data.
I like this idea a lot, Eduardo, because once you use the raw data for transformation and the job is done, you can just put it in the bucket where it doesn't cost you much and it stays there and it's really cheap.
Exactly, right? So that's kind of like what happens with a lot of the raw data. Is like you ingest it once, you only have to read it once, and so you can then move it over to a cheaper tier, and then be able to keep the other ones in different tiers where you're going to be accessing faster. The other reason why you want to have the ingestion bucket instead of always having to go to the source is so that if you need to run the pipelines again, the ETL pipelines or the transformation pipelines, you can do this without having to hear the source data again. And many times that source data is production or is a system that has some limitations in regards to how many calls you can make. So it's a lot better when you have moved this data out of that production environment and you can actually hear the data as much as possible. So that's why that exists. Sorry. And it's very useful, right? It's not about if you have to rerun the data rather than when you have to rerun the data transformations. All right. I think this is a really great conversation. Now, you mentioned something about Rupal about the PII data, right?
Mm-hmm.
So we have certain what can I say, requirements sometimes from different institutions or different organizations and the sectors that they work in. So one of them is a financial institution. Andrea, you're very familiar with this, PCI, and that was a fun certification to go through. But there is others, right? Like HIPAA. And HIPAA is very strict, just because of the amount of personal information and sensitivity of what you're dealing with. What additional considerations should we take on HIPAA? Do you have any insights in that, Rupal?
Yeah, you have for AWS, you have the health data lake, right? So that is specifically for the healthcare providers, for hospitals, and for other organizations which are dealing with health information, also for biomedical information and all. And these are HIPAA compliant. So when you're using Health Lake data lake for health organizations, which most of the hospitals and other research organizations use. The data about your patients, the PII and all, everything is protected. So that is AWS offering for the healthcare people. So I think people who are using the health data should specifically go for the health data lake.
Fantastic. And it's just these solutions, when you're talking about very specific industries, these solutions allow you to comply with certain requirements a lot easier. So with these, like ETS helps to make sure that you are staying close to all the requirements for a HIPAA compliance. Now, that doesn't mean that, hey, I put it in, I'm using S3 or I'm using Redshift or I'm using this Hell Lake in Amazon. That automatically means that I'm certified. There is, like in any cloud provider, there is a shared responsibility model in which the provider is able to give you a service, but you're still responsible for putting controls around that service on how it is utilized and make sure that it is compliant with the certification or the requirements that you need internally or externally. And so that goes with every single service that AWS has, that Google has, that Azure has, is being able to be able to do that, right? And so one of these big examples is recently we had big news in Snowflake that there were a lot of customers that data was compromised. Now, from my understanding, maybe Rupal, you have read something similar or you have read something different. From my understanding of the situation is that Snowflake systems actually were not compromised. What were compromised were the systems of the users of the companies. So those were infiltrated. The bad actors got a copy of the username and passwords to be able to access the data lake or the data warehouse in Snowflake, and then they were able to infiltrate that and then start extracting the data. And this was over a period of time. Now, it's a question like you can put the blame of like, hey, Snowflake should have known better where these people were connecting from. But at the same time, that is not the job of Snowflake. The job of Snowflake is to provide you a service, and is this shared responsibility model where they say like the customer, you as customer, you need to ensure that the usage of your account is in compliance with your internal tools or internal guidelines. They don't know if all of a sudden you are in North America and you're pulling this data and then you start seeing a new stream going in Europe. Who knows what's the reason for that, or in Asia, right? So this is very important. You need to ensure that you still follow all the protocols, and it's not as easy as saying, hey, I'm using X service, therefore I am secure. I remember
Yes.
like many years ago, we were going to choose a new vendor for one of the services in the call center. And one of the selling points at that time was like, well, we are in AWS. And I remember that this was a selling point, just saying we are in AWS. Our services are running completely in AWS. And that was just a selling point. It gave you a sense of, oh, okay, there is additional security than being on-prem. And that's fantastic. But that was 10, 11 years ago. That is not the case today, where you say, hey, I'm in the cloud, I'm in AWS, I'm in Google, I'm in Azure, and you're like, okay, let's go over your security practices, because who knows exactly what those look like, right? And that's why we also have SOC 2 and PCI and HIPAA compliance to make sure of all of these things. So anyway, that's a huge deviation on security, and that's because data security is very important. I just want to mention one last thing. We did mention this in our first episode when we were talking about AI. The same thing applies here, and I want to repeat that. When you're working with AI, with machine learning, no matter whether it's generative AI, classical ML, give only the data that you need to the model. Do not give additional data. And so that is just good practice in general. It's easy to start giving it additional data, especially with Gen AI, to give it access to additional data. It's cool, some of the stuff that can come out of these models, but it is very important that you do not give data that should never be disclosed, because there is a possibility, even if you instruct it not to, there is a possibility that it will be disclosed out into the public. So with that big red warning of security, to make sure that we keep that topic and we let our listeners know that how important that is. Now, we're going to move on to our next section.
Yes.
This is one of the fun parts of this, that I really like about this podcast.
Right. So let's. Sorry.
Let you go for it, Andrea.
Let's move on to skill building. So for those of you out there listening to us, looking to get started with data lakes, Rupal and Eduardo, what are some essential steps that they can take?
I'm gonna repeat myself. I'm gonna sound like I don't know how the phrase comes in Spanish, but it doesn't come in English. So I'm gonna avoid it now. But it's a broken record. I'm gonna sound like a broken record. That's what I meant to say. But start trying it. Free credit, free services are available in our cloud providers. There's tons of different tools out there. If you do have through work or through your personal subscription, O'Reilly has many different labs that you can do in data lakes, in data warehouses. I recommend that you search them up, but there is tons of examples. And I'll try to post some in the comments later on about getting started with AWS data warehouse and data lakes. But Rupal, from your perspective, what will be things when you're a customer, say like, hey, we have this data, what is it called? We have this database, and then we think that we need to move to a data lake, but we don't know anything about it. What are the tips and recommendations that you give?
Now, depending on where the data resides right now, so if the customer says that my data is on-premise and my database is on-premise, and you want to put the data in data lake, you could use some services like DMS, or you could use, say, if it is Postgre, you can do Postgre dump or MySQL dump, and you can these are the Postgre and MySQL services that they allow you to put data, move data, so you can use those dump services as well to move your database data in S3. So those are some of the services. You have other data, say, for example, residing in your on-premise data, and you want to move it to S3, there are different services for that as well. So you can use some of the services offered by AWS for transferring data from on-premise to S3.
And so, in that sense of, let's say that you're starting with this, and I say like, you know what, Rupal, I don't know anything about data lakes. I don't know anything about Glue. I don't know anything about it. Like S3, I have used it because I have to, not because I understand how to better take advantage of it. What resources will you be given? And I mean, you don't have to give it like specific resources right now on the go, but like, what kind of things will you recommend that we start looking at?
I like using AWS tutorials. You know, they have so many tutorials right for the beginners. And if you go through those tutorials one by one, those workshops that they have, because they kind of give you step by step how to use the services. So those tutorials are quite handy. So that's one of the things I go to learn more about the services that they have, and their documentation also is quite good. So putting together the tutorial and documentation gives you good beginning.
Yeah, I like those ones. There is always, I need to double check if they have an immersion day on the lakes. Maybe they do. AWS has these quality immersion days where they take you through different aspects of the technology throughout, through many, like multiple labs. And so they have one for like Redshift, they have one for SageMaker, they have one for each services. I need to double check if they have one for what is it called, for data lakes.
I think they do have it, yeah.
Yeah, so we'll share an opportunity there where we are able to like the link to it, and then you'll be able to start going on with that.
Cool, thank you. So moving on to career insights. Eduardo, what career opportunities are there in data lake engineering then?
I think right now, like, this data lake is a part of a big skills, right? This of data engineering, being able to manage all this data at large. And right now there is a lot of usage for this. We are getting into an era of AI. Gen AI is taken by storm, and I think we mentioned in the previous episodes, the differentiator in Gen AI is not the model that you use. Everybody has access to the same model, and multiple people will tell you that. Everybody has access to Hugging Face. Everybody has access to models in AWS, in GCP, in Azure, OpenAI. Like, there is really no differentiator there. Everybody has access to that same field. If you're building your own LLM, well, that's a different story. You're building your own. But the biggest differentiator is going to be the data. For the majority of organizations, data is going to be the differentiator. And how do you handle data? It's not just about like, hey, I have tons of data, I'm going to give it to the LLM for many different reasons, right? Cost, performance, accuracy, quality, different things. So what can you do with this? And so even in the era of AI, it is becoming more important is data. Is the differentiator between organizations. And so it's important for all of us to be able to manage data properly, securely, and take advantage of the information and the knowledge that is in this data as much as possible. And so knowing how to do that in data lake, I think it's very essential, and it's really is really important nowadays. So it's becoming more and more critical for us to have these skills. Rupal, what is your point of view of data engineering in this nowadays?
Data engineering is extremely important because it's moving data from one point to another. Now, another important one is also the data governance. That's one of the roles I come across. Is the data governance is when you have your data in data lakes, you need some people, some role, some person in the organization who knows exactly what is there, where it is coming from, how it is stored, and also which tier it is stored in, how it is being used, who has access to it. So all these complicated matters also kind of fall into one role of data governance. So that's one role. And data engineer, as you mentioned, is extremely important because you're moving one data from one point to another. And that could be, again, batch ingestion, or it could be, again, say, streaming data ingestion. Also, you need transformation, or you do not need transformation. Or sometimes you're just trying to check what's there in the buckets. So even over there, the data engineering part comes because you should know how to do that with services to use. So I think data engineering definitely is extremely important.
Thank you. I was going to say if there is anything else that I would like, but no, I think that's...
Okay, so could you maybe share any real world case studies where companies are using data lakes?
I think there are like tons of different, pretty much every big organization is using the data lake in one way or another. We take a look at, for example, let's take a look at PayPal. The amount of transactions that they process it's just so large. They have a lot of subsidiaries. And so all of this data needs to be put into one place to be able to understand how the transactions are happening, where the trend of transactions, where they are making more money, statistics of how many users are active, how many users are inactive, what type of purchases are being done, the geography of these users, and so on and so forth, so that they can get analytics into what is the best campaign that they can run next time. And so we are talking about an insane amount of data. We're talking about terabytes of data that are being handled here. Now, one cool use case that I had in the past, it was a cryptocurrency company. And they were using S3 to be able to store transaction, to be able to store part of the ledger, a backup of the ledger, as we are using, as he was using, what is it called? Blockchain. So a backup of the ledger had to be put into S3, and once it was in S3, then they were able to replicate it into other S3 buckets in different accounts so that they can do development and testing of new features and stuff like that. And so it will generate all of these different things. Now, all of the activity that was happening during development, all of the transactions on all the logs of what was happening in the system will be going back to S3. So I remember one time in this crypto company, the invoice came out to 100,000 K in a month. It was 110,000 K in a month for an S3, just S3. And they were looking to see what happened. And basically it was just part of the development of a new feature that was just generating a lot of logs. They were just doing a lot of testing and things like that to make sure everything was working. And it was just generating that many logs, and it was going over everything to S3 where they would be analyzed and process all the logs to see what was going on. So you don't necessarily need to use data lake for your end users, right? It can be for internal users, for all these logs, for all these analytical work that needs to be inside, to be able to help you with development of the product. So that's a kind of like a cool use case that I found out, that I was kind of like exposed to, just to see that insane amount of data that will generate $100,000 in S3 usage in 1 month. Rupal, any interesting use cases that you have come across, without mentioning any particular names, but just the use case itself?
Yeah, one company I was working with, we used to collect click data.
Okay.
So whatever clicks were happening on the website. So we did some testing with a couple of websites which were not very active, and the developers were confident, and they took decision to kind of, okay, like we can make this go live, and then maybe take 10 companies or 50 companies or whatever. And then when we started ingesting that data, it just suddenly went off the hook. Like we had no clue how much data is being stored, and then suddenly there were so many S3 buckets created with thousands of folders. And it was like we were just losing track of what's happening in our own account. And that was a lesson for us as to, okay, when we are collecting data, it could go completely bonkers, and you have to have good data governance, as I say, before you try out new things with data.
Okay, so see, everyone learn from Rupal. She already went through this. That's why data governance is very important to her. She already went through it. Please don't go through it because it's painful.
It's painful, yes. AWS is laughing, but we weren't.
Okay, cool. Thank you. So do you guys have any tips for continuous learning or staying updated with data lake technologies? Rupal, I go to you
I would
first.
say basically is being curious, is just keep your mind open, keep your eyes open, keep looking for new opportunities of how people are using their data lakes, data warehouses, data lake houses, and all these different terms. And it's just being curious. It's just being open to more knowledge, and also be ready to do some hands-on work.
We didn't tell Rupal to say be curious, just FYI. That's just
our
natural,
motto.
you know. It's just part of the what we need to do to keep up to date. Rupal, can I ask you, how much time do you spend a week and a month spending on like continuous learning in new skills or in training to keep up to date?
That is not a good question, because I would say at least 18 hours a day I'm learning and working. And to be very honest, my work is learning too. So it is all continuous learning for me. But yeah, definitely weekends, weeknights, of course, weekdays. I work continuously on data, and I enjoy working. It's part of my hobby now, so it's fun.
So Rupal, would you be open like to sharing what is it that you do to it?
Of course, yeah. So I'm CRE, Customer Relationship Engineer. And what we do, what we have is this system where our customers open a support case with us. So if they have any questions about their ongoing processes, if they want to improve the process, so if it is something that they're doing and they want to start something new, they come to us and say, okay, we are trying to build this architecture. How should we go about doing it? Do you have some suggestions? Or it could be that we are already doing this, the processes are not working as well as we expect it to. Do you suggest some changes? And the third part is when, oh no, this is broken, what do we do now? And it's those urgent cases. So that is the kind of model. And then we help our customers with in all these situations.
So I work with Rupal, and this is what we do day in, day out. Also, Rupal, we do webinars with the organization. So we deliver
Yes.
webinars in AIML right now because this is the hottest
We
topic.
also do workshops.
We also do workshops. So we're going to keep up to date with all of that. And so this is kind of like the fun part for us, like because we love learning. There is a lot of customers out there that will come out with you with a new situation, with a new problem. And then you will have to dig in, try to figure out what's going on or what is the best architecture for the use case and the requirements. So it's always a continuous learning side of things. Now, we are, even though Duet is global, we are very collaborative. So Rupal is in Toronto. We have colleagues in Europe and Asia as well. And so sometimes they are in the same situation as us, jumping into a new customer problem, and they may find a dead end, or they may not get any ideas, they get stuck. And so they reach out to the larger Do It community and say, hey, can anybody help me with this issue? And then CREs like Rupal or myself will jump in to help them. And so there is so many different ways in which you get involved into a problem that it's impossible for us to not learn, to not keep up to
Absolutely.
date, because it's just so much. So one of the things that I want to call out in all of this is you see Rupal mentioned it, that learning has become her hobby. Why do you think that is, Rupal?
I'll tell you honestly, it's such a vast topic and there is so much going on, so many new things. So again, if you're curious, then there is endless possibilities out here. Another thing is that Do It is very generous to give us opportunity to do the exams, the AWS certification exams, and I'm doing those exams, and that helps my learning as well.
Lost Eduardo.
Andrea, how are you? How's it going, Andrea? You'll have to cut off some
doing well.
parts, isn't it?
I know. We'll have to edit it.
You will have
So
to edit
you
it.
work in the same team as Eduardo?
Yeah. We are in different regions though. He's in North America, West region. I'm in the East region.
East. Mm.
Territory, we call it. Yeah.
Wow, nice. And you've been working there for 1.5 years, you said?
Yeah.
Okay.
A little
And
more
you
than
like it?
Eduardo. Eduardo is senior though. I like it, yeah. I'm learning a lot from Eduardo, honestly, because he's senior, he's in the field for longer time, and he's very generous. So that helps.
Nice. What were you doing before that?
The same thing.
Oh
I
yeah.
was
So
working
you
with
were
another company
like,
in the data field itself.
what did you study at university? What's your background?
Oh, that's another thing, right? I studied economics and statistics.
Ah,
Yeah.
interesting.
And I did management courses after, so MBA. And then we had a family business, so I was working there for some time.
Okay. What happened? We lost you.
Sorry, my kids
We
woke
lost
up,
you.
and so.
Okay.
All right. So one of the things that I wanted to mention around this, if you're watching this podcast, you will see the big smile on Rupal every time that she speaks about data. And it's just such a infecting smile. She's enjoying this. And what I'm trying to say with this is like, in everything that you do, passion is a big part of driving force behind it. And so a lot of times you will get into something just because it's something that is going on right now, is the next thing that everybody's talking about, or why not, but find the passion in it, find the passion in what you're trying to do, because that is going to drive a lot of the learning, a lot of the curiosity to move forward and be able to really expand those skills in that area. So it's not easy. Any subject is not easy. Data lakes, data engineering is not easy. It gets complicated. There is a lot of nuances that we haven't talked about. And there is a lot of headaches when you're doing data transformation. So make sure that you understand all of that. But if you have passion, you're able to move through all of that with a big smile in your face and be able to take great things from that.
Well, I just learned that Rupal's background is on economics and statistics. So it just shows that we can go from like any path, and like as long as you have that curiosity and like willingness to learn something new, then we can do it.
I mean, you're also an example, Andrea. I mean, you study, what is it that you study in school?
I did linguistics.
You did linguistics.
Yeah.
And I mean, right now you're kind of doing something along those lines, but there was a time where you were not.
No, yeah.
When we were working together, you were doing something completely different.
Yeah, that's right.
But there was a lot of big passion behind that as well. And so that is also something that you may find, right? Like the passion that you have today may not be the passion that you have in 10 years, and you can move on and you can navigate your career path in many different ways, but it is that passion that will drive that forge into new fields, into new opportunities, and be able to help you move forward. So that is fantastic.
Okay, so I think that's all we have for today. short summary of what we talked about was the structure components, the structure and components of a data lake, advantages, challenges, tools, what else? Some tips for building data lake skills. And I think that's it. That was a very complete talk.
Yeah, that was a great talk. Rupal, I want to say thank you. Thank you so much for making the time. Thank you so much for sharing your insights and your stories. It was fantastic having you here. And I'm sure we'll have you again in the future.
Me, both of you. This is really interesting, really fun.
Thank you so much, Rupal. So thank you for tuning in, and thank you, Eduardo, for all your insights. Until next time.
Bye.